Hello and welcome to Module 7 of EDC 672, Creating and Integrating Technology in the Classroom. This module covers the topic of data. Data in the classroom, data for instruction, and data as a tool for enhancing teacher effectiveness and school effectiveness. So let's start with some definitions of data and what are some different terms that it's important to understand. The first distinction to make is between qualitative and quantitative data. Qualitative data is typically not numerical, but more narrative data. So examples of qualitative data would be surveys of students, questionnaires, or interviews of students. And in qualitative data, we will typically use a narrative format to represent the responses. Quantitative data is typically numerical. Examples of quantitative data might be standardized test scores, breakdowns of demographics of students, percents of students by age, by gender, by grade, by ethnicity. Those are all examples of quantitative data. Qualitative and quantitative data each have their place in the educational setting. They each offer information that's valuable, and it's important to understand when you would use one or the other. The next distinction is between individual and cohort data. So individual data is just that. It's data that is attached to a single individual. So for example, if a student takes a test, that test score is individual data. Cohort data is the collective data for a group of students. For example, if you were to give a test to your entire class, all of the data put together into one data set would be the cohort data. You could also break it into subsets, and you could have the data for the males and the females, and each of those would be a set of cohort data. It's important to understand what disaggregation is and how that can be useful. So talking again about that example of giving an assessment to an entire class, to disaggregate the data, we would break out the data by perhaps gender or ethnicity or age for that set of students. And that's important information to have, because when we compare those different subsets, it gives us information that is valuable to us in the classroom. It's also important to understand formal and informal data assessment. So formal data assessment would be something like, again, that standardized test or a survey or questionnaire, something where everybody understands what's happening, everybody understands that this is an assessment where data is being collected. Informal data collection is something that happens when a teacher walks around the classroom and witnesses students working and makes some little notes or just makes reflections or observations on what's happening. The use of classwork or homework even can be informal if it's something that is not generally planned for, but is just being used in a way that's informing instruction for the teacher. Another distinction to make is between formative and summative data. Formative data is data that is collected during the process of instruction. So typically, if we were doing a 6-week unit on a science concept, we might want to do some formative data collection every week just to get a sense of where students are. Summative data would be the final assessment at the end of the 6-week unit to get a final grade perhaps, or a final assessment of how the instruction went. Formative data is ongoing. It's collected often throughout the school year. Summative data is typically more of what we call high stakes data and is collected typically less frequently. Progress monitoring is another form of data collection that we should understand. Progress monitoring is a type of formative data collection, and basically we set a benchmark for our students in some area, and then we assess frequently to monitor the student's progress in reaching that benchmark. When the student reaches the benchmark, we then assign a new benchmark. What is the value of student data? So it goes without saying that as teachers, we need to understand where our students are, what they know and what they don't know. And obviously, the analysis of student achievement is the key component or the key reason why we collect student data, but there are other reasons as well. So we can use data to predict outcomes. Many times data on one assessment predicts success on another. So, and this is typical of standardized assessments. So we can use data analysis to help us drive instruction. So for example, if we give an assessment to students in the beginning of the school year, we can make some logical conclusions about where weaknesses are and where we need to focus our instruction so that the outcomes are better for the student. Data can be used to assess programs, not only students, but we can use data that has been disaggregated and stripped of identifiable information to see if programs are being effective. So we can use summative data assessment for an entire school, remove student names, and break it down by race or gender, and make some conclusions about how effective our program is for different groups of students. And we can also make correlations. So it is useful sometimes to correlate an outcome with an input, and data collection can help us do that. So we can, by comparing the summative data sets with the treatment or the instruction that students received, we can make some conclusions about the effectiveness of instruction. And of course, data should help us make informed decisions about what we're doing in the classroom every day. So how do we do that? How do we use data to inform instruction? And there's really two ways to look at it: the individual student data and whole group. So most common, simplest, and most often we're using data to assess student learning, or we should be. We can use that data to develop a reteaching plan. So if we see a pattern of weakness in students in our classes, we can use that data to develop a plan for ourselves as teachers to reteach wherever there's a deficiency. We can use data to differentiate instruction. So again, if we see gaps, we can go back and reteach with a different strategy, with a different approach to ensure effectiveness. Data can be useful to help us adapt our curriculum. So we can look at data in the long range each year and see where there are gaps in instructional effectiveness and revise our curriculum for the grade level or the school. Data is a great communication tool. So both with students and with parents, it's very, very useful to be able to share data and have those conversations with students and parents about what they're seeing, where the strengths and weaknesses are for that student. Perhaps a little bit more controversial, but also valuable, is the use of data to assess teachers. So we can use data, student data, in aggregate to assess the effectiveness of teachers, with the understanding that data presents there's a limited correlation between student achievement on standardized tests or other assessment measures and teacher effectiveness. We can use it to assess programs, the entire school, or the entire district. So these are some ways that data can be a useful tool to help us inform instruction. So that's kind of the wrap-up of the discussion of data. What you need to work on is watch the videos on the Module 7 tab, review Prensky, Chapter 19 to 23 before class so that you're ready for some class activities. There will be some group activities in class, and we'll begin Project 4 in class. That's the end of the Module 7 overview video. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you, and see you in class.